Alli, welcome to the show.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. 5 boys. I have
Yeah,
3, and I thought we were crazy, but 5, you have a basketball team.
I really do. The youngest is 8 and the oldest is 17. So
Oh
it's
my
really
gosh.
loud and it smells as bad as you would imagine in my house.
So, I mean, does that help drive some of the outcomes of this book, Breaking Busy, Finding Peace and Purpose in a World of Crazy? I love the title of this, and I think this was one that for our listeners, a lot of people can resonate with. We are, in my estimation, we are busier than ever in trying to keep up with all the pressures, all the demands. And I'm really looking forward to kind of drilling in on how have you arrived at this place of peace and purpose in a world of crazy. So let me just jump in. What the majority of people know that they are busy and probably too busy. How can we break our busyness?
Well, when I was trying to figure out how to even tackle the topic of busyness, I went out and started doing research and got every book on time management and busyness I could find. And what I realized was if time management was really the big issue to why we were so busy, we would all have it by now. Like it's important, and I have a whole chapter on time management, but it's about so much more. And in going through the research, I found that almost 50% of Americans said, I'm way too busy. I'm sacrificing my health and my sleep and my happiness for busyness. So my question was, well, what are we all so busy doing? And so when I started looking at all the underlying causes of why we let ourselves get so busy, that's where I started diving in and figuring out how we can actually start tackling some of the underlying causes. I mean, a big one, especially for women and for men too, is we don't want to let people down. So when people come to us and they have a need, we all like to consider ourselves good people. We're high capacity people, and we want to help them out. We want to do the right thing. We just may not have the capacity in a certain season of our lives to actually do it.
Yeah. So do you find that in your research, are folks who are more prone towards anxiety? Are they more in the category of being prone to the busyness factor?
Well, it really depends. I mean, if you look at anxiety as a whole, there's such a wide range of
Yeah.
symptoms from the everyday little anxiety to people who have crippling anxiety. So everyone's a little bit different. The more low grade anxiety that most people have on a day-to-day basis, that's the same type of personality that never wants to let anybody down and is going to take on more and more and more until we finally crash.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of our show, we work with a lot of couples. And so maybe I need to ask this question. It's more focused on that. How have you seen the effect of busyness on marriages?
Oh, busyness is a killer because, I mean, who do we take advantage of most? Our spouse. We love our spouse. Our spouse is great. We'll pass in the hallway. Hey, how you doing, right? And I hit a point one day with my husband years ago where I said to him, we're doing everything right. We look like the all-American family on Facebook. We have all these kids. You're coaching Pee Wee football. They're making you ref Pee Wee football, which is the worst because the parents are the worst when you ref. We both were teaching on Sunday mornings. We hosted a small group in our home. We both were working full time. But I said, I'm miserable. Like, I'm doing everything right, but I'm miserable. And I said, let's sell all of our belongings. We'll get an RV and we'll live off the land except for Starbucks and Wi-Fi. Luckily, he didn't want to do that, but he was feeling a little overwhelmed too. So we started looking at life and figuring out, what we can say yes to and what we can say no to and be a little bit more intentional about it. So we weren't like two ships passing in the hallway, to say, you take him here, I'll see you next Tuesday.
Yeah. So you said you did a bunch of research, you read a bunch of time management books, and really the diagnosis is that those were the keys to helping us. We'd all figured us out at this point.
Yeah,
we're all still struggling. So what is that solution? What's the solution to our busyness?
Well, for most people I've talked to, and for me, it's finding out why we say yes and why we take on more things than we should. I mean, it's really an issue of self-worth and people pleasing. So we want to believe this lie that we can and do and have it all at the same time, which we can't. I mean, everything goes through seasons. I grew up reading women's magazines that told me that I'd have a fabulous career and a family, and I would weigh 5 pounds, and I would knit sweaters for the poor and make my own food in an organic herb garden. Like, it's exhausting. But in my mind, like, that's what was an acceptable adult. That's what one looked like. And for men and women both, we get in these patterns where we take on responsibility. We say yes to something. It feels good because we get positive feedback. Hello, it's a good thing to do. So we take on more and get more positive feedback, and we get stuck in a loop where one day we wake up and we realize, I have no capacity left. I'm stressed. This is too much. I'm done.
Right.
And what really helps is to take a good look at life, figure out what those things are that can be edited out. And one thing that makes people uncomfortable at the beginning, but they really warm up to fast, is when I say, what's sucking the life out of you? For most of us, we know at a gut level, if we're really going to be honest, what's sucking the life out of us. And so finding ways to minimize that, to cut that out, is key.
Yeah. So I guess along the lines of sucking the life out of us, what is that limit? How do we know that we've arrived at our limit of busyness? What are some of the telltale signs of that?
Well, I like to think of it as a capacity level, like our phones.
Okay.
I'm very attached to my phone. I love my phone. I may or may not sleep with my phone on Do Not Disturb under my pillow. I love it.
No.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting anybody becomes Amish. I'm not a minimalist. I believe we should live big, happy, full lives. We just shouldn't be crazy busy. So, and that's my disclaimer.
Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, I love on my phone how I can see the battery percentage of how much my phone can handle. And I know when I hit like 20%, I better find an outlet. My phone needs to recharge. But my phone and I have great boundaries. I don't yell at my phone. I don't berate my phone. I don't get mad because my phone can't go longer. But we don't treat ourselves that way, and we tend to not treat other people that way. So I just thought, wouldn't it be great if we could say, you know what, my capacity in this season, my capacity right now, I'm at 30%. I can't take on anything else. Talk to me next year. Talk to me next month when I can. And giving ourselves compassion for our capacity, I think, is key, and for other people. So for me, when I know I'm at low capacity, when I'm running at like 20%, I need to recharge, it's often, for me, I'll recognize that my emotions are a little off. If I'm quick to snap at people in a business situation, if I am quick to snap at my husband or my kids, I know that I'm a little bit stressed. I'm far above my capacity. For me, my out of control emotions reflect the out of control demands that I put on myself.
Okay.
When those get off, I know that I'm a little bit out of whack. Another sign is not taking care of yourself. I referenced earlier that study where almost half of Americans said, I'm way too busy. I'm not taking care of myself. I'm sacrificing all these things. And when we're in that state where it seems like there's too much to do and too much coming at us all the time, sometimes the last thing we want to do is actually take time for ourselves. To think about cooking a healthy meal or exercising or making sure you sleep enough, it's just exhausting. You'd rather, eat chocolate and Nutella out of the jar and watch Netflix till midnight, not speaking from experience or anything. So when we're not taking care of ourselves, it leads to illnesses. I went to the doctor a few years ago, and I was always sick with something, a sinus infection or, a cold, whatever it was. And I just wanted a pill to get better. And the doctor said, do you think you could be stressed? And I want to be like, duh, of course I'm stressed. I'm an American grown woman. Like, yeah. And he said, you're going to have to either figure out a way to deal with your stress and get this under control, or you're going to stay sick. So that was a huge wake-up call for me. So there's a bunch of different signs, but for me, the big ones are not taking care of myself, out of control emotions, and then just being sick all the time, my body getting run down because I'm not taking care of myself.
Yeah, I love it in your book. You have I think it's like 7 different what you would call you've reached your limit, and you mentioned inability to control your emotions, lack of self-care, illness, chronic lateness. Oh my goodness.
Right?
Yeah. Self-medicating in excess, neglecting important relationships, neglecting God. I mean, I think those are all litmus tests of kind of where you at on that spectrum of busyness. Because my question, kind of to follow on with this, a little bit deeper, Are we talking about belief systems here? Because I think all those things could probably be pretty glaring and in front of us, and we could probably recognize and say, yeah, that's me. But it doesn't change, right? Things don't change. And I think oftentimes, has it been your perception, this is about belief systems and changing the belief systems within us to be able to really see progress?
Absolutely. It requires us changing the way we think about our worth, where our worth comes from, and that we don't have to constantly strive to prove our worth, whether it's to ourselves or to other people, because that's the culture we live in. We live in a culture that says you have to be more, you have to do more, you have to achieve more to be enough. And if we're living out of a place where we don't feel like we're enough, we're always going to be, it's going to be way too easy for us to take on more and always be striving and trying to prove ourselves.
Yeah. I want to come back to that question, but before we do, let me just ask a couple more. How can couples stay connected in the midst of busy seasons, and and I think vice versa, how can parents with their kids? What are some tips?
Well, here's what I found. Another thing that is really wonderful. When I was tackling these topics of busyness and overwhelm, when you're in a state where you are crazy busy, it seems like you have to move a mountain to get better. But very often, the biggest changes in life can happen from the smallest little tweaks that we do. So instead of, looking at your family one day and being like, we are going to have date night 3 times a week, and it's going to be amazing, and children, we're all going to sit on the couch, and we're not going to watch SpongeBob, we're going to talk about how much we love each other. Like, no, that's just not going to work. In my marriage, what I found is my husband and I, in the midst of, everything going on in this big family, if we get together every day and just celebrate our wins, kind of like on SportsCenter when you go over the highlights, we know we don't have to talk for 3 hours, but we share about our day, we share what made us happy, and we connect in that way. It's just that little connection point in the middle of a crazy day. And with my sons, my 2 older boys are teenagers. They are 15 and 17. We always connect every day after everybody else goes to bed. Teenagers never sleep, right? But my little kids, they are 12, 9, and 8. I snuggle them in bed every night for 15 minutes each, and they tell me their 3 things that they're grateful for the day. And I'm trying to develop the spiritual practice of gratitude, which I don't tell them or they'd never do it. But I just say, what 3 things are you happy about? And just that little bit of snuggle time I get with them and them sharing their wins and their happiness with me, it's always the highlight of the day. So it doesn't take much effort. It doesn't require us to completely change our schedule around, but just a little focused conversation every day completely changes a marriage and a relationship with a kid.
I love it. We have 3 little boys, and we found that to be the same, busy schedules, but being able to connect, we do the thing called the peach in the pit. So what was your peach and what was your pit for the day? And we're able to process that. And they're at the age where they still think that's pretty cool. And so we're gonna ride that one as long as we can. But I love it. I mean, I think it's the little things in the midst of everything else, and it's that consistency that really allows you to stay connected amidst all that busyness. How have you found that having friends actually help your marriage?
Oh, it's so key. When my husband and I were first getting married, my mom gave me some great advice. She was like, baby, don't treat your man like he's your girlfriend. Let your best friend be your girlfriend. Let your husband be your man. He'll be happy and you'll be happy. And what she meant by that was he can't solve all your emotional needs. Like, you like to talk a lot. You like to talk about your feelings. You like to verbally process things. He may not want to hear every little thing and may not want to talk to you about your shoes that you're going to buy tomorrow. Like, find girlfriends that can support you in all the ways you need to be supported. Talk to your husband about the important things. But when you want to talk for an hour about your favorite TV show that he may not like, or, about another friendship with a mutual friend, call your girlfriends. Let your husband off the hook. So, as I was going about writing this chapter in the book, I went, what if that's terrible advice? I mean, I'm not an expert. That's what my mom said. And I did find research that said the way marriages are and the way we are living in the U.S. away from our extended families, it does put more pressure on spouses to try to fulfill all those emotional needs for each other. So strong relationships, strong friendships with other women is really a key to get that emotional support, because one person can't do all the heavy lifting for another person.
So we've been talking about busyness, and I think one of the aspects is like kind of your limit. Part of that limit's driven by people that I would call in the category of draining people. They're the drainers, or the life suck that you mentioned. Let's just talk about them for a moment. You know, as Christians, we're called to love all people. How can a person best love another person who's draining? Or in other words, how can they treat a person lovingly without allowing them to drain all their emotional energy?
Well, this is where some people have been like, that's not a very Christian attitude of you. I've been like, we're not called to win over the jerks. Like, some people are just toxic. Like, they're like secondhand smoke, breathing toxic effects in our lives. And sometimes it's a relative. Sometimes it's a boss. Sometimes it's someone you're super close to and you can't get away from. So for them, you have to just practice putting up good boundaries and not taking that behavior personally. But if it's a girlfriend who's just crazy and always bringing drama into things and kind of sucking the life out of you, you know, love them, pray for them, but you don't have to hang out with them anymore. I mean, I feel like the mark of a good friend is someone that pours into you and doesn't suck the life out of you in every relationship. But we often, especially women, feel so guilty. You know, it's painful to end a friendship and to back away, but when every interaction just sucks the life out of us, we have to learn to do that. Not only for ourselves, but for our marriages, for our family's sake, because we're not modeling how to have healthy friendships to our children if we have toxic friendships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's this little book called Boundaries, I think was really put it well, right? I mean, there's a sense of we have to draw those boundaries with folks that are toxic. And I think toxic has a lot of different categories that you could put people in. But nonetheless, I think really important, because that will be a life sucker in terms of not dealing with it. Maybe talk to us about, how does a person know which projects or acts of service are a priority? I think you call in the book busy with a purpose.
Yeah. It comes into tapping into what we feel like we're called to do in this world. I mean, I was the girl who wanted to go to the library with my mom, and I would check out all 15 books at a time, as many as they'd let me. I wanted to go read nonfiction books. I was a weird kid. I read the encyclopedia. I would, give random facts to anybody that wanted to know. If anybody watching is a fan of Strength Finders, my biggest Strength Finder is Input, which basically means I like to collect information. It's super nerdy.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm a know-it-all, annoying. And that when I read my personality profile, I went, okay, well, yes, that's me, but I was so bummed out by it. I wanted to have woo or something fancy or something exciting, but no, I just have boring old Input. But what I've realized is God gave me the gift to be able to amass a lot of random info and share it with people to help them. So it didn't necessarily work in my favor when I was 12 and super annoying, but as a mom, it helps because I can teach my kids. As a writer, now I'm able to collect all this info and share it in a book. As a speaker, I'm able to do it in that way. So I'm using the same gift that God put inside of me years and years and years ago, but in different seasons, He's given me different ways to use it. So when I have opportunities to do new things, active service, new opportunities, I ask, does this fall in line with my gifts? And if it does, it's easy to say yes. Now, at my kids' school, all the parents get together. We're working on this fundraiser for the senior trip. And all the moms like to bake, and then they sell the baked goods. That's not my gift. If I did baked goods, we would get sued because people would get sick. But I'll call any business and get stuff free. Where the other moms are like, I would rather have a fork in my eye than go ask people for free stuff. I'm like, I'm all over it.
Yeah.
Let me handle that. So it's really just identifying where your lane is and saying, I wish that was my gift over there. There's so many gifts I wish I had, and I keep telling God I'd use them for His glory, but apparently I wouldn't because He's not giving them to me. But you stay in your lane. And you use those gifts that He's given you in different ways in different seasons. It's when it's when we feel guilty, like we should be doing more, we should be doing something else, and we take on responsibilities that aren't ours to take on, that we start feeling crazy busy and stressed.
Yeah. So in a way, you're talking about decision making, right? Mm-hmm. In your book, you talk about the 5 F's of decision making. Can you walk us through those?
Yeah. I'd love to walk you through.
Okay.
I love alliteration, so I had to make them all start with F. Whenever you're making a big decision, it's important to have a framework to make decisions. Mm-hmm. Little decisions, you can just use little pieces of the framework. But say you have a big, massive decision to make, you want to use all 5 F's. And the first one is faith. You want to, gut check with your faith. Does it line up with biblical concepts? Did you pray about it? Are you, if you feel like it's great, but it goes against Scripture, you're not going to do it. So faith is the most important. The second F is family. So how does your spouse feel about it? Is your spouse in agreement? How will it affect the children? That's key. Faith, family. The third one is future. And future is one of my favorites because whenever there's a decision to make, we often don't think about our future selves. And I like to say, let me think about what future Alli is going to think about this. And future Alli in a year or in 10 years may hate me for making this decision. So I got this thing called the 10-10-10 framework. And any decision you have to make, you can ask yourself, okay, how will I feel about this decision in 10 minutes? How will my future self feel about this decision in 10 weeks? Or how will I feel about it in 10 months? And very often when people want us to do something for them, especially, in 10 minutes it feels great to say yes because you've made that person very happy, right? But then you think, how will I feel about it in 10 weeks? Maybe not so great because maybe we don't have the energy or the resources or the time to do it. Very often we say yes in the beginning and we're like, oh, I'll figure out the details later. By the time you get to later, like you're hating yourself for saying yes. Then you get to 10 months and then you're really mad you said yes, right? Because you just don't have capacity. So that third step after faith, family is future. Think about your future self. How will I feel about this in the 10-10-10 mark? And that especially keeps me out of a lot of trouble. There's a lot of things I want to say yes to, but when I think about 10 weeks in the future, there's no way I can pull it off. Then the fourth one is fulfillment. So it taps into our calling, what we're made for, what makes us come alive, what makes us feel fulfilled. It goes into even the thing with the school and the senior fundraiser. I don't feel fulfilled baking cookies, but I will call anybody and ask for free coffee for a fundraiser, right? And the last one would be friends. We know that we're supposed to get wise counsel. We know that a lot of wise counsel is smart, but we live in a Facebook age. And so very often we want to ask our 500 friends on Facebook to weigh in on our decisions. But it's really important to pick 2 or 3 people who've earned the right to weigh into your life and whose lives bear good fruit. And these people are wise. You want to know what they say. Go to them and have them weigh in on your decisions. And then once you've made it through all 5 of those F's, it's almost impossible to make a bad decision.
Yeah. Well, I think closely related to decision making is communication. And how does good communication help us break this busy cycle?
Well, bad communication will kill you anytime.
Right.
I tell a story in my book of wanting to be friends with this woman because she loved movies. And she liked dark, twisted, psychological thrillers. And I'm really more of I want to go see Avengers or a Pixar movie. That's me. But I wanted to impress her. And I thought, I'll just, my husband doesn't like going to theaters. He wants to rent everything. I'll just tell her I like these movies too. And so because I didn't feel comfortable and I didn't communicate with her, I spent forever going to see movies I didn't like. Until one day we're at a table across from each other and I just broke down and said, I'm so sorry I lied to you. And I have been lying all this time. But I don't like these movies at all. And she just laughed and she said, I knew, but I didn't want to embarrass you. I could tell you didn't like them. So now we laugh and, I'll send her a picture in front of an Avengers movie poster and she'll send me a picture in front of something horrible. But that was my big wake-up call. I wasn't communicating even in the simple things like what movies I liked. So if I'm not going to communicate about something small, I started looking at my life in all the ways me under-communicating was just wasting a lot of time and energy and effort. And in the book, I break it down with there's over communicators and under. I'm a classic under communicator. I tend to think people can read my mind. I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to let anybody down. So I hold things back more than I should. And then there's over communicators who just go on and on, but never really get to the point, right?
Right.
So I talk about in the book, how to identify if you're an over or under communicator, and give some tips on how we can tweak it a little bit so we can make sure people know what we mean and we don't waste a lot of time and energy.
I like it. And I think that's so true. I mean, so often the communication and what we project, our assertiveness, our ability to listen will impact this area of our life in a significant way. A good friend of mine, we'll connect weekly just to check in and see how things are going. And for the longest time, I just kind of started avoiding the phone call because it would be I just knew it was an hour of him talking about his day. And I just didn't want to hurt his feelings. And finally, like you said, I had to get honest and just say and communicate lovingly that, can we make this 10 minutes? Because I don't have time for an hour to hear, and then into prayer and he's like, oh my gosh, you should have just said something. I'm like, well, yeah, I know. I should have. That's on me. That's my bad. So communication is a huge piece to this.
It is. And communication can be really hard because we live in such a text-based era.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of emojis. I will use emojis all day long. I'll even use them professionally if it's a text situation because, and I give this situation in the book, you can say one sentence via text message and take it a million different ways.
Right.
So emojis really do help us. And there is some research to back this up. I felt so redeemed when it came out. That using emojis work as emotional identifiers. So you can say, like, I think in the book I say, oh, I can't go to lunch, I'm on a deadline. People can read it and go, well, if I go to lunch without them, are they going to be mad? Are they sad? Do I need to call this person? Right? But if you put a happy face on the end of it, can't go to lunch, you go, I'm on a deadline, happy face, then people are like, cool, all right.
Yeah.
Angry face, then they know you're angry. Right. Sad face, then you give them a call.
Yeah.
So, like, I keep trying to teach my husband to use emojis, and he's just not there yet. Like, I'm landing on a plane. I get a text from him. He goes, what time will you be home exactly? And I said, well, is this because you miss me or because you're planning something? And he goes, both. Like, I want to get dinner on the table. What time are you going to be here?
Right.
And so now when he texts me questions, I'll be like, can you add an emoji? Me an emoji. So we're working on it. We're working. So far, I haven't had any luck. So I have to just kind of project emotions right back to him.
You just need to introduce him to the one that actually has the emoji of himself, right?
Have you seen this?
Yes, exactly. And
every time I use Bitmoji to him, he just says, stop. just stop. I'm trying.
Right. Well, so is there a sweet spot when we're talking about busyness? And I hear this often. There's, you got to find the balance. Is there a sweet spot? And how would you identify that?
Well, the balance changes every day.
Yeah.
And it's very humbling for me because I will go through periods of busyness. And I go, I just wrote a book on how not to be busy. But this is the life we live. We're never going to wake up one day and go, well, what do you know? I'm not busy anymore. I don't have a million demands on me.
Yeah.
I guess I'm going to go get a pedicure and have someone peel grapes for me. It just doesn't work that way. So it's something that we always have to revisit. We always have to keep an eye on our calendars, look for those signs of being over capacity and then use those strategies to just knock it out of the park and make sure we have a little margin because it's a war we're in every day. It's a battle. Mm-hmm. But a sweet spot to me, it's where I don't feel frazzled, where I feel like I can live a full life. Anybody that reads Breaking Busy is somebody that wants more happiness, that wants more peace, and that is probably really easy to get overwhelmed because they're doing more than a normal human can do. When I was writing the book, I actually put a line in there and it said, I don't want anyone to think we became Amish. And my publisher said, you can't say that. Like, that is so offensive to Amish people. And I said, I don't think they're reading my book. Like, they're not my target market. They don't have this problem. So it's really just everyone finding their balance of where they feel good, where they feel happy, and where we feel like we're living the life that we're created to live, and not just living this life that we automatically feel like we should live because of the world standards.
Yeah. You know what's so interesting about that question, and I think for me personally, a mentor of mine has really helped me understand the power of prayer in this, and again, prayer I think has a lot of different connotations to a lot of different people, but in this mentoring role, I mean, hearing from God, I think so much of our busyness is that we're not actually hearing what he's really saying. And so if you get to that place where you can understand and hear, it just frees up your world to be able to say, okay, what are you asking me to do in the context of this? I mean, for my wife and I, even, people constantly saying, will you commit to this? Will you be a part of that? And our response has been, well, let us pray about it and we'll get back to you. And it's not a passive, like, oh, we're just going to put the old prayer thing on it. Like, we literally pray and say, God, are you asking us to do this? Because if you're not, then this is the right, and it's helped clear up a lot of our scheduling issues.
It makes all the difference.
Well, and as part of your book and I love this last question, I think nails it. And I really want you to speak to this whole thing of our self-worth is tied to our busyness. And how does the element of prayer and really the work that we find in God ultimately drive this process and ultimately, hopefully giving us some freedom at the end of the day?
I love that you mentioned prayer, because when I first felt the call to write this book, one of the first things I wanted to do with it was to help people not live lives that are so busy and so loud that they're not hearing from God. Once I learned to change my priorities and focus in on that, it was like, oh, I'm hooked into the power source now? Like, how did I miss it all this time, right? And we live these lives of so much noise and chaos that most of us aren't hooked in. And if we're not hooked into the ultimate power source, we are forever going to be on a hamster wheel. That's why I put that little hamster wheel on the cover, because we want to break out of that. And there's only one way ultimately to break out of that. And in terms of self-worth, it's huge. It is really huge until we get hooked in with prayer, until we actually internalize the truth that we have worth because we serve a God that is grace-filled. He makes us worthy. Until we internalize that and we believe that with our mind and our soul and our body, we are forever going to be on that hamster wheel spinning, trying to prove that we're enough. I mean, the culture that we live in, I mean, I don't use this word lightly, but it's toxic. I was at the kids' pool yesterday with them swimming, and just the music that was playing from the pool speakers, I had to go, you know what, like, this is damaging to kids to hear. I don't know how at this point I've turned into Julia Sugarbaker, if you ever watched that show in the 80s, but like, that's what I'm becoming. But everywhere we go, everywhere we turn, we get messages that objectify us, that show that we're only valuable if we perform, if we're good enough. If we hit all these impossible standards, like knitting sweaters for the poor and growing your own food and who knows what else. Until we internalize that real truth, we're always going to be spinning our wheels.
Yeah, so good. Well, Alli, thank you for taking time to be on this show. And what we've been talking about is breaking busy, finding peace and purpose in a world of crazy. We're going to have links right below where you can go and get her book. And I highly recommend that you do. You've just done a great job unpacking something that I think many, many people struggle with. And if it's not handled right, it starts to bubble up in ways that it's toxic for ourselves, right? So thanks for the work that you're doing, and all the best to you and your family.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
All right.